In a small but proud neighborhood on the edge of Lagos, where rusted rooftops stuck the daylight like vintage cash and the scent of jollof rice filled the late afternoon breeze, there lived a woman named Mama Effie. Her real name became Esther, but no one had known as her that in years. She had thick fingers from years of carrying water and firewood, a lower back curved from endless days of scrubbing floors, and eyes like burning coal, watchful, fierce, and complete of memories untold. Humans said she had as soon as been a splendor, and perhaps she had. However, time had changed. Splendor was something deeper, dignity. 20 years ago, she became hired by means of Chief Adney, a rich, commanding guy with a limp in his left leg and a coronary heart buried somewhere below layers of conceitedness and satisfaction. He needed a person to prepare dinner, smooth, and manipulate his grand, however lonely mansion. After his wife died and his son turned into sent abroad to have a look at, many had come before her, however, none lasted. Chief was too tough, too quiet, too broken. But Mama Effie didn't leave, she stayed. And within the 20 years that observed, she became more than only a housekeeper. She became the keeper of the house's soul. She knew every creak inside the timber floorboards, each hidden bottle of whiskey, the leader idea she didn't see. She knew while his silence meant anger, and while it meant sorrow. She boiled herbs for his asthma, prepared meals without being informed, and woke earlier than the roosters. While he yelled, she failed to recoil. When he fell sick, she became at his bedside, urgent warm cloths to his brow with hands as consistent as prayer. And yet, he by no means once stated thank you. But Mama Effie didn't serve for thank you. She served due to the fact carrier changed into her satisfaction. In her thoughts, the house had ended up her obligation, her identity. She watched the seasons skip like trains, watched the compound boy grow into a person and marry. She watched Leader's fitness decline slowly, like an vintage tree bending under wind. And still, she stayed. Then at some point, without caution, Leader died. It was early morning whilst she located him, nevertheless in his chair, his pipe bloodless inside the ashtray beside him. There was no battle, just peace, as if the person who had fought everything, his body, his destiny, his loneliness, had subsequently made peace with silence. The funeral was large. Important humans got here in darkish suits. Guys who had now not set foot in that residence in years, walked its halls, remembering testimonies and pretending they'd cared. However, Mama Effie stood inside the back, fingers folded, her eyes dry. Now, not due to the fact she did now not sense sorrow, however, due to the fact her sorrow had no need for tears. It sat quietly in her chest, like a sleeping baby. After the will turned into examine, no person said whatever to her. No repayment, no present, nothing. Just silence. So she packed her few assets, a small radio, some worn dresses, her Bible, and left the residence she had kept alive for 2 decades. She moved, returned into a humble room in the back of her cousin's tailoring keep. She began promoting bean cakes in the morning, sitting below a diminished umbrella because the town rushed. She never complained. She became too proud for that. However, at night, while she lay down on a thin bed, she neglected the residence. She missed the walls that knew her touch. She missed the silence of the chief's chair. 3 months succeeded. Then one rainy afternoon, as she sat frying a car over a hot iron pan, a black Jeep pulled up beside her roadside stall. The door opened, and a man stepped out. He wore a sharp match, shades, and footwear that seemed too new for the mud. But even without the glasses, she could have acknowledged the one's cheekbones everywhere. It was Toby, the leader's son. He had grown taller, broader, and his accessory changed into exceptional now, twisted like overseas vines around Yoruba roots. He stood in front of her for an extended moment, not saying something, simply searching at her. Then he spoke. Mama Effie, please, I want to talk to you. She checked out him the manner one would possibly look at a ghost. Ah, she stated softly, you continue to bear in mind my call. I bear in mind everything, he said, and that I need you to come again to the house. Her arms trembled slightly as she wiped them on her apron. Your father is gone, she said. There's nothing left for me there. But his face, so like his father's, yet softer, more youthful, twisted with something like pain. It's no longer the house. It's me. I want you. He defined that he had lower back to settle his father's affairs. However, the whole lot felt bizarre. The residents didn't breathe the equal. The body of workers didn't realize where whatever become. The place turned into cold, mechanical. Like a resort that one was domestic. I don't recognize the way to live in it, he admitted, his voice cracking. I don't even recognize the way to grieve in it. She said nothing, just listened. And then, slowly, she rose and observed him. Whilst she stepped returned inside the residence, it felt like walking into a dream. The air smelled exceptional. There has been no sound of pots clanging, no remote coughing from the leader's room, simply polished silence. She moved from room to room, touching things, straightening pillows, starting windows. It was muscle memory. The residents appeared to sigh, like a widow greeting in vintage buddy-tea dinner. She cooked a gyuzi with pounded yam, much like she used to. Toby sat at the desk like a boy once more, gazing his plate as though it held all the recollections he had attempted to forget. You used to scold me after I didn't wash my fingers earlier than consuming, he said with a small smile. I nevertheless will, she answered, and so she stayed. Not as a servant this time, but as something greater. Toby, now the only inheritor, had inherited not just the residence, however, the silence, the heaviness, the echo of a father who had by no means found out the way to love. In Mama Effie, he observed a bridge. She told him tales of the chief now. Not simply the strict guy, he remembered, but the quiet moments, the time he cried in the course of a radio broadcast about Biafra, the way he left meals outdoor, the gate for beggars in the dark, things that made him human once more. And slowly, something modified. They talked, ate collectively, shared tea past due at night. She corrected his Yoruba, and he corrected her English. He took her to the health center while her knees started out to ache, and she or he insisted he bring domestic a spouse before he grew antique and useless like his father. They bickered like antique pals. They laughed. Then one night, as they sat watching rain trace long fingers down the glass windows, he requested her the question she had never predicted. Why did you stay? All the one's years. Why didn't you leave? She changed into quiet. For a long term, then she stated, due to the fact he needed a person to stay, even if he didn't know how to ask. The silence that accompanied turned into now not heavy. It became heat, like a blanket. Years later, while Mama Effie ultimately surpassed peacefully, surrounded by means of snapshots of her children, her grandchildren, and a residence that had come alive again, it was Toby who held her hand until her closing breath. It was Toby who buried her with honors, who informed the world that the woman who had served without asking had grown to be greater than circle of relatives. She didn't raise me, he stated at her funeral, voice thick. She raised my father's soul, and in the end, she raised me too, and that, in the long run, changed into the truth of Mama Effie. She was never only a servant, she changed into the memory keeper, the soul healer, the lady who stayed. The years that observed have been quiet, but wealthy. The house, as soon as stiff and prideful, had softened underneath Mama Eve's touch again. However, this time, she wasn't on my own. Toby remained in Nigeria longer than he had planned. At first, it turned into duty. Then it became something else. He commenced tasks, network clinics, youth shelters, and every time he came home exhausted, it changed into Mama Effie ready, asking if he had eaten, if he had remembered to sleep. He didn't recognize whilst the bond modified, while her voice started out to feel like home extra than the walls round him. She turned into older, of root, antique enough to be his mother. However, love doesn't usually wear romantic clothes. On occasion it comes inside the shape of deep loyalty, care, and know-how. And that is what bloomed between them, something past name or lifestyle. Still, time did now not spare her. At some point, she didn't upward thrust from bed. Her legs, which had carried a house on their lower back for decades, had grown vulnerable. Toby added doctors, nurses, remedy, but the body has a clock no guy can reset. She smiled from her pillow and said, I have lived, Toby. Don't permit tears waste the lifestyles I gave to this house. Allow them to plant seeds as an alternative. In those very last days, he moved her mattress into the sunniest room, added her the fragrance of hibiscus vegetation, and study psalms. At her request, she informed him one last story each nighttime. A few were real, a few he didn't understand. She pointed out the leader's quiet regrets, of her one super love who died young, of the child she lost earlier than she even had a threat to call him. Toby sat there, taking it all in. This woman who had by no means, as soon as complained, changed into slowly leaving him. But instead of bitterness, she left at the back of peace. A tea the last night, the rain again. A tender drizzle tapped the window, much like the day she got here, returned, she grew to become to Toby, her voice just above a whisper. You have been in no way your father, she stated. You have been continually higher. You notice me. He kissed her forehead, tears falling freely. I like you, Mama. And he or she, together with her closing power, reached for his hand. And I loved you long before you knew what love supposed. With that, she closed her eyes. And just like the chief, she left in peace. Toby did now not weep loud. He sat nevertheless beside her, letting the silence wrap him like fabric. She had taught him that if grief is sacred, it must now not be shouted but venerated. He buried her beside the garden she cherished, below a mango tree she planted herself. On her tombstone, he didn't write housekeeper or nanny. He wrote, she turned into the soul of the house, the mom of the forgotten, the one who stayed. And from that day, every time Toby spoke of love, he noted her, no longer with sorrow however, with fireplace in his chest,